Yaskawa.
Welcome to the Sigma-5 Hardware Overview e-learning module. The content for this e-learning module is we'll start with a product overview of both motors and amplifiers, and then go on to just looking at some of the new features of the Sigma-5 motors and of the Sigma-5 amplifiers. So let's start with the product overview. First, if you know anything about Sigma-2, which we've had Sigma-2 out for quite a number of years, you'll know that the Sigma-5 then is very similar to the Sigma-2, and in fact it's identical in several different ways. First of all, the CN1 I/O connector is identical. That's referring to the analog version. We'll see later that there are a couple of versions of the Sigma-5 amplifier. So the analog version is the same connector as Sigma-2, and the Mechatrolink version of the Sigma-5 amplifier has the same connector as Sigma-3. So no new connector technology really here. It's the same type. The digital operator built into the Sigma-2 and the one built into Sigma-5 both work the same way. The regen resistor, sizing, connection, configuration, the parameter you set, that's all the same between Sigma-2 and Sigma-5. And control modes, there's no new control modes. The same control modes apply to both Sigma-2 and Sigma-5, torque, speed, and position modes. And other features that are common in the industry, torque limits are handled the same way. We still handle absolute encoders the same way. I will mention right away that the Sigma-5 does have the absolute encoder standard, but the way that it integrates to the amplifier and to a third-party controller is the same. Holding brakes work the same. What that means is that the brake output controls a relay to turn the brake power on and off. And input and output mapping parameters are also the same. They're handled the same way, although with the new Sigma-Win Plus, there is a nice wizard which does make it very easy to do input and output mapping. Now, before we get too far, I would like everyone to get into the Sigma-5 mood by watching this promotional video.
Sigma-5.
Sigma-5 has arrived. So if you hear me whisper Sigma-5 during this e-learning module, then you'll know why. It really does go through all of the features and benefits in one big flash of adrenaline. So what are the major features here and benefits of Sigma-5? It's, as it says here, size, performance, and ease of use. The size is smaller, performance is higher, and it's much easier to use. Looking at it in detail here, the motor, volume of 2/3, 20% shorter than a Sigma-2. The amplifier has also come down in size, 3/4 of the volume. And high density mounting, meaning it takes up very little space on the cabinet. It's taller and skinnier than the Sigma-2. For performance, now every motor standard encoder is a 20-bit serial encoder. I should mention that many of the motors also go up to 6,000 RPM. That's for the smaller motors, up to 750 watts. And the amplifier now has a speed frequency response of 1600 Hertz, up from 400 Hertz in the Sigma-2. Under ease of use, we have the main ease of use here is the auto-tuning feature. It's called Advanced Auto-Tuning, and it really does a great job. The digital operator can be used to access this advanced auto-tuning feature, or the software Sigma Win. There's even a 1 parameter tuning, which you use to tweak your position settling time down to, in some cases, 0 milliseconds. The digital operator is better now. It has 17 character backlit LCD display, 5 lines. You can copy up to 10 parameter files and write those parameters also then from the digital operator to another amplifier. Also, for ease of use, the encoder connection now is at the motor, and your cable length will match the machine, as it says here. We got encoder cable connections at the motor. There's no more motors with the flying leads coming out of the motor chassis itself. So here's a summary comparing Sigma 2 and Sigma 5. You see on the left and the right. The Sigma 2, we had the SGM-AH as our low inertia motor, and that motor has been pretty much just transferred over to Sigma 5 as the SGM-AV. It is smaller in length now. The SGM-PH, now we do have a new series of motors called the SGMGV. And so in many cases where you would have used an SGM-PH motor in Sigma 2, you'll now use an SGM-JV motor with Sigma 5. It has twice the inertia as an SGM-AV, although it looks identical as an SGM-AV. So it's not any shorter. It's exact same dimensions, but inside the rotor is twice the inertia. The SGMGH motor has been replaced by the SGMGV motor in Sigma 5, and the SGM-SH motor has been replaced with the SGM-SV. So you can see the V there for 5, Sigma 5, whereas the H kind of represented the Sigma 2 series. Now, one difference between the Sigma 2 and Sigma 5 amplifier in this bottom section here, you remember the SGDH Sigma 2 amplifier was really one type of amplifier. You would add an option card for a Megatrol link or any other options you wanted. Now, in order to save space, the design for the Sigma 5, the SGDV amplifier, has 3 different types. The Megatrol link type, the analog pulse type, and the option type, and we'll see more about those later. Here is a quick chart with the amplifier capacity. You'll see here on the left that we do have 100 volt single phase amplifier input voltage up to 400 watts. Those do run the 200 volt motors, so you won't find any 100 volt motors in the Sigma 5 series. All the motors are 200 or 400 volts. However, you can run your system off of 100 volts, as we do with our demos. There's also 200 volt single phase, 50 watt to 1.5 kilowatt, and 3 phase, going even up to 15 kilowatt. So a lot of this is the same as Sigma 2, the general capacity ranges are the same as Sigma 2. And finally 400 volt 3 phase from 500 up to 15 kilowatts. So now let's look in more detail here at the Sigma 5 motors. And specifically, we'll concentrate on the SGMJV, SGMAV, and SGMGV. The SGMJV is the new motor series here. It's new for Sigma 5. We have this up to 750 watts. It's what we call a medium inertia motor. Now remember again, it's the same size as an SGMAV with twice the inertia. This motor has a maximum speed of 6,000 RPM. The fastest motors we had in Sigma 2 went to 5,000 RPM. This is also the only motor we have which can go up to 350% of rated torque. Standard encoder here on all Sigma 5 motors is the 20-bit absolute encoder. And another new feature here is the connector system. As you can see on the right, there's a connector now for every motor, not just for the larger ones. So even the small series motors have a connector. It screws in, and so there's no leads on the motor side. It's a small connector with shielding, and this SGMJV series is a drop-in replacement for the A series, the SGM-AH with Sigma 2, having the same flange and shaft size, although it will be shorter than a Sigma 2. And we've also upped the IP rating here to IP65. Here's a page from the catalog for the SGMJV. And you can see the different ratings here, the different output specifications from 50 to 750 watts. And remember again, all of the motors are 200 volts for this motor. There's no 100 volt motor SGMJVs. 100 volt is for the amplifier only. And the absolute encoder, 20-bit absolute encoder, is a standard. We do have incremental encoders, but that would be a special non-stock option. And really, there's very few reasons why you would need that. So to go with the best here, 20-bit absolute, which is the standard. You can see the other digits here, the revision. Our standard shaft is the straight shaft with key and tap. And then this last digit is the option, the motor options, either 24-volt holding brake or seal, or both, or none. Same options as we had with Sigma 2. Now, the SGMAV series is very similar to the SGMGV series. This is the motor you want when you need extremely low inertia and extremely fast acceleration with lighter loads. Now, comparing to the SGM-AH in Sigma 2, we have two additional motor sizes, the 150 watt capacity and the 600 watt capacity, kind of filling in some holes there that we might have had with Sigma 2. This motor also goes up to 6,000 RPM. The peak torque is 300% on the AV motor, same as the AH with Sigma 2 on that item. But we do have an improved efficiency, the same 20-bit absolute encoder, the same connector system as the JV series, and as expected, it is a drop-in replacement for the SGM-AH series in Sigma 2, and also has the IP rating of 65. Here again is the catalog page for this time the SGM-AV series, and you can see again here the different capacities. Notice code C2 for the 150 watt and code 06 for the 550 watt output. And the rest of the options here to build the part number are the same as we saw with the SGM-JV series motors. So here are some benefits. Accuracy and low cogging torque. Low cogging torque is needed in many applications, especially the machine tool, where the cutting surface accuracy is very important. And so with these new Sigma-5 motors, we have been able to improve that from 2 microns to 1 micron. And this results in very smooth machine operation. Now, in case you're curious of what the inside of the motors look like, if you want to compare on the right here, the SGM-AH rotor, and you can see its relative dimensions compared to the SGM-AV, which is considerably shorter, a little bit wider of a rotor to maintain the same inertia. And then you can see the SGM-JV has an even slightly wider rotor in order to make the inertia twice the inertia of the SGM-AV. And you can see in all cases that we're able to shorten the length of the rotor assembly. And that same reduction in length is also shown here. If you compare on the right the SGM-AH, the Sigma 2 stator, this is all lined up with the SGM-AV and SGM-JV, with the SGM-JV opening just being slightly larger for the slightly larger rotor. Moving on now to the SGMGV series. The SGMGV series motors go from 300 watts up to 15 kilowatts. And you may know that that is an extra size here. The 300 watt size is new. One of the major features of the SGMGV is that when comparing to the SGMGH in Sigma 2, you're going to be one size smaller. So, for example, in Sigma 2 you had size 05 for 500 watt and 09, 850 watts. And if you look at the SGMGV size 09, it will be the same physical size as the Sigma 2 SGMGH 05. So basically we're saying an 850 watt motor now is the same size as the old 450 watt motor. The motor weight has been reduced over the entire family of motors here, 20% lighter on average. Improved efficiency, that same high accuracy, 20-bit encoder, and the cogging torque now is down 2.5% down to 1.5%. Yaskawa is able to manufacture these motors with 30% less parts, resulting in improved robustness. And also, the encoder coupling on the SGMGV motors is new, which gives us a vibration level of 5 Gs. These motors have a maximum speed of 3,000 RPM. And there is one note here on the bottom right. The size 05 and size 20 have a lower inertia and smaller flange than Sigma-2. What that means is if you took an SGMGV size 05 and an SGMGH, the Sigma-2 size 05, they will not have the same flange size. The Sigma-5, due to its reduction in size, goes down to an even lower flange size. The same with size 20. An SGMGV size 20 compared to the SGMGH size 20 do not have the same flange and shaft. So what do you do if you need to go from Sigma-2 to Sigma-5? In that case, size 05, Sigma-2, you'd want to go up a size in the Sigma-5. Same with size 20 in the Sigma-2, you'd go up a size in Sigma-5. And so by going up a size when retrofitting Sigma-2 to Sigma-5 for these two sizes, you would be able to just have a drop-in replacement motor, and of course the larger motor would still be able to satisfy the application's requirements. Here is a nice picture of the SGMGV 13, which physically is the same size as the SGMGH 09. One of the product benefits of the SGMGV is the robust motor with 5G resistance at the encoder on all the motors up to 15 kilowatts. What that means is that we have longer life under rough motor conditions and reduced machine service needs. It also means that in some of those high impact applications where perhaps a resolver used to be required, now we have the capability to attack those applications using this robust encoder. This page shows the new technology of the SGMGV series and some of the highlights here. The stator, now a 10-pole high-density winding, resulting in less loss, more efficient. The rotor, high-powered magnet, making the whole unit smaller. All of the seals are O-rings, resulting in the unit being waterproof. The encoder now is one unit, resulting in very easy assembly, and again, the robustness of that encoder. And then the coupling on the encoder is Yaskawa original. It's designed for Yaskawa specifically and results in anti-vibration, referring to the shock rating of 5Gs. We also have a redesigned holding brake, which also helps the brake motor be a little bit smaller. Another feature for the SGMGV series is the smaller and one-touch mating type of encoder connector. If you're familiar with the Sigma-2 SGMGH encoder cable, it was a relatively large cable, military style, with several turns required. It took a while to put those cables on or to take them off. And now with the SGMGV, the Sigma-5, it's a very small cable, very easy, a quick push and it locks on, and then you'd have to turn a ring to pull that cable off. And here's a photo of the encoder unit. Of course, you cannot see the encoder optical disc as it is protected here within this casing, and also you see here the new coupling that is key in providing that 5G tolerance. Another feature is the uniformity in the way that power and brake connectors are handled. Again, comparing back to Sigma-2 with the SGMGH, we had smaller motors, 4.4 kilowatts and lower, had just one single connector for both power and brake. Larger than that, there was a separate cable for the brake. Well, now with SGMGV, Sigma-5, we have two cables for all sizes of SGMGV as part of the redesign here of the brake. And as mentioned, the brake connector is also smaller and has the same features here, the one-touch mating. So easier to use here all around with the connectors and cables. Finally, for the SGMGV, here is the part number page from the catalog, where you can see the different availability here from 300 watts and the different sizes up to 15 kilowatts. These motors are offered in both 200 and 400 volt with the 20-bit encoder standard, and the other options are the same as the other motors, SGM-AV and SGMJV. There is the non-stock option of the 90-volt brake is the only difference here. Our standard here in the US is the 24-volt brake. Let's look now more closely at the Sigma-5 amplifiers and their features and benefits. And so looking at the features here of the Sigma-5 amplifier, remember that there are three different types of main power supply. There's the 110 volt single-phase AC, as well as the single-phase and three-phase 200 volt, listed here as 230, or the three-phase AC 400 volt. Power range here goes from 50 watts up to 15 kilowatts, although that does depend. The smaller capacities, such as 50 watt, are available only in the smaller voltages, 100 and 200 volt. And 15 kilowatt is available for 230 volts three-phase, as well as the 400 volt three-phase. These amplifiers can run from 0 to 55C without derating. And it lists here the overload for 3 to 5 seconds. The Sigma-5 has reduced mounting space, 30% less than many of the competing products in the market. And another really big feature here is that we have on board, every single Sigma-5 amplifier has a safety stop on board that complies with safety category 3 and stop category 0. Here's another list of features of the Sigma-5 amplifier. Just kind of list them all, and we'll look at some of these in more detail. The 1600 hertz bandwidth, 30% smaller. Didn't mention before, we now have USB connection to the software, resulting in much faster communication. Really makes it a joy to use. The absolute encoder battery cable. Now you don't need to have a battery stored in the amplifier. You can have that right in the cable. There's a safety stop input and output, as I just mentioned. There's a built-in digital operator on the analog pulse version. The I/O wiring is the same as Sigma 2 for the 50-pin connector, and it's the same as Sigma 3 for the 36-pin connector. Some of the very useful tuning features are the automatic vibration suppression. It will set the notch filters automatically if it detects a resonant frequency. There's the ability in the amplifiers to test without motor. And remember also that the 100-volt model runs only the 200-volt motors. Don't look for any 100-volt motors. I think we've mentioned that now a few times. We also mentioned the external digital operator can save and write parameters. And please remember that if you don't have the software, you need the external digital operator to access the advanced tuning functions. So it's either the software or the digital operator for some of these advanced tuning functions. Now, this presentation does not cover the Sigma Win Plus software, but just a little preview here that within the Sigma Win Plus software and also within the digital operator, we can get to the 3 tuning options. Tuning less, that's used by default in the amplifier. The advanced auto tuning, which is the auto tuning setup that you would run through and let the motor do some moves on its own. And then 1 parameter tuning, where you get the motor moving either with the controller or with the built-in program jog and look at your settling time or whatever other key indicators that you're graphing, and you can then you tweak that 1 or 2 parameters up or down, and you'll see how that affects the performance of the machine. Also within the software is a setup wizard, which makes it very easy now to choose your control mode, to choose your I/O, and really brings you through the basics of what you need to get your application up and running without needing to memorize lots of parameters and nibbles. The data trace has had a lot of work done to it. We can now graph up to 3 data traces simultaneously. It has some built-in measurements, such as measuring the settling time automatically, and just many other improvements in the data trace, and many other improvements in the software just overall. It really makes a great software package, the Sigma Win Plus. The Sigma-5 amplifier comes in 3 different types. There are 3 amplifier types. The first type is the analog pulse, sometimes referred to AP. Analog pulse, that's your standard 50-pin I/O connector, the same as the Sigma 2, and it has the full keypad, the 4-button built-in keypad for the digital operator. This is the amplifier that you'll use when running with a third-party controller that sends an analog or digital signal. This is also the amplifier you would use if you were to use Yaskawa's SMC 4000 controller. The second type of amplifier is the Mechatrolink 2 type amplifier, and that one has a reduced display without the digital operator keypad input. You see the Mechatrolink communication ports and node address setting here, but other than that it is identical except for the CN1. The CN1 connector is a 36-pin connector, and that does have the same wiring as a Sigma 3 Mechatrolink, but not the same as the Sigma 2. Notice that all of these have the other connections identical. There is the serial interface where you connect the LCD digital operator. There is the PC tool. They're calling it PC tool connector. It's a USB connector. It's a standard connection that you'd find on a digital camera, a USB mini. And then there's a safety connector right above the encoder connector. The third type of amplifier is the option card type of amplifier. And this option card type is not released at the time of this recording of this e-learning module, but there are plans in the future to have different types of option modules, and if you then wanted to use one of those option modules, this is the amplifier style that you would need. As we've shown for the motors, here is the amplifier part number breakdown directly from the catalog. It is very important to note, those of you who are familiar with the SGDH and the Sigma-2, we have a more standard approach to the capacity in the part number. We are using, instead of watts in the amplifier, we are using the rated current output. And so you'll see, for example, R70 means 0.7 amps. The R stands for the decimal point. So R70 would be the amplifier that you use for the 50 watt motor, the R90 for the 100 watt motor. The 2R1 is 2.1 amps. That would be for the 200 watt motor, etc. So this is the standard way of rating an amplifier and of calling the part number, both in the inverter side of the business as well as now the servo side, is to use the current output. That's what an amplifier does. It amplifies current. That's the reasoning behind it. Notice the voltage rating, 100, 200, 400 volts. And of course, notice that the current will be different when going between 200 volt and 400 volt. There's the digit here for the interface, Mechatrol link or analog pulse. So to summarize the part number, you have to know the code based on current. You would want to choose your voltage, and then the interface type, whether it's analog pulse or Mechatrol link, which is what we have available right now, and in the future you'll see a code for the option type. Looking ahead to the option card type, you may ask, what does Yaskawa have planned? First of all, let's notice that there are different types of option cards. There is the option card 1 here, they're showing in pink. That's the various interface, I/O network, etc. This option card 1 is the option card that you'll have with the option card type of amplifier. Now, option card 2, the safety option card, those are also under development, but the connector for the option card 2, the safety option card, is available on every single type of amplifier, as well as the encoder feedback card. So there are at least 2 different ports on the side of any of the amplifiers for option cards 2 and 3, and then with this third type of option card amplifier, you would have the other option cards under development and under planning and investigation. Looking at this chart here, you see that we do have the standard amplifier, analog pulse, and Mechatrol link 2. We're planning option cards here. That would be the option card style amplifier for Mechatrol link 3, DeviceNet, Indexer, Ethernet IP, EtherCAT. We are also planning a safety option card. That's for option card slot number 2. So any amplifier can have the safety option card, and option card 3, the encoder feedback, for full closed loop encoder, where you put a linear scale connected for the feedback. That is completed. And there's also investigation to having a resolver interface card. Now, one of the major benefits here to the Sigma-5 amplifier is this embedded safety, the safety function. And just so you know some of the words here, we're talking about a safety stop according to Category 3 as part of the safety spec given by EN 954-1. You may be familiar with that. And what that means is that the safe stop is reached while the main power to the drive is not interrupted. This will give you faster disconnection and more reliable than other solutions, such as putting contactors on the output to the motor. It says here no additional contactors are needed then. Servo drive life is extended, and design and installation time is saved. Please refer to the safety e-learning module for Sigma-5 for more detailed information on the safety function. Another very useful feature is the test without motor feature. And what this does is it lets the amplifier simulate having a motor connected to it. And it is a mathematical model of the motor. It really does try to mimic a motor as completely as possible. And you'll have position error, you'll have torque, there'll be settling time, there'll be everything you'd expect with a normal motor. And what that lets you do then is connect your controller. Like maybe you've got the MP2300 SIEC controller. You can connect all of your amplifiers, but you don't have to connect the motor. You can just leave that motor, you disconnect it or unpowered up at least, and you don't have to worry about motion actually happening or having very large motors running if you're in an office environment. And this lets you check your wiring, verify your programming, work with the parameter sets with the amplifier, again, without needing the motors or the machine connected. A few words now here about the absolute encoder. Remember that the absolute encoder is functionally equivalent to the Sigma-2 absolute encoder. So what I mean by that is that if you're going to use a third-party controller, the absolute encoder does require some engineering time. It's not just plug and go with a third-party controller. It is plug and go with Yaskawa controllers, but not with a third party. Section 5.9 of the design manual tells you how to read the signal and pull out the information. You need a serial connection, etc. But one of the new features here now with the absolute encoder is the availability of the battery cable. So now you can keep your absolute encoder powered up with the battery by either using the battery cable, or if you want, you can still use the connector CN1, the I/O connector, but you don't have to use the battery compartment anymore. In addition, there's now a parameter you can set which will give you a low battery warning before you get the low battery alarm. And that way you can try to take care of any low battery condition before it results in lost position at the next power down. Now, when you do have the SEN input, this is a very important point I want to make. If you have a demo or if you have any system, is that you need to have that SEN input wired. The SEN input is required before the servo will even energize, before it will jog, and you'll not get an alarm by not connecting this signal. It's just in a kind of a waiting mode, waiting for you to activate the absolute encoder. And so the SEN input must turn on for, the spec is 1.3 seconds. Pins 4 and 2 to the servo pack on the CN1 connector need to have that 5-volt signal. The other option you do have, as it says here, is set your encoder to incremental. So if you are doing, let's say, a setup or a test run, and you don't have the SEN input wired on your analog pulse amplifier, you can just go and either temporarily or permanently set PN002. The easiest way is just use the setup wizard. It'll ask you that at some point in the setup wizard if you want to use it as incremental. And that way you bypass the absolute encoder and you'll be able to continue with your test run. If you're curious as to what the absolute encoder cable looks like, here's a page, again out of the manual. It's just a little compartment with a battery in it. And it's our same normal battery, the JZSP BA01, and you just pry that open with a screwdriver and you can replace the battery. The cable does come with the battery, so when you order the cable, it comes with the battery installed. You do not even need then to order battery as a separate item. Just order the battery cable and you've got all you need then to use the absolute encoder as absolute. Here is the parameter that will let you choose either battery alarm or battery warning for low battery condition. By default, you have the alarm when the battery voltage drops, and then your option with this parameter PN008 is to output a warning if the battery voltage drops. For the alarm, if you look down at the timing diagram, notice that the alarm only monitors the battery voltage during the first 4 seconds of operation. Basically, after the servo has been on for 5 seconds, then for 4 seconds you're monitoring the battery voltage for 4 seconds, and then it just stops monitoring that. So if the machine's on for a long time and maybe the battery just drains over normal self-discharge, you may not ever get any alarm. And in that case, you might want to then choose the warning, where the battery voltage is constantly being monitored. And in the case of a low battery condition, the amplifier would not fault out. Instead, you'd get the warning display A.930. And hopefully that would draw some attention, at which point you could replace the battery without losing that absolute position. Please note that when you change the battery, if you don't want to lose that absolute position, the control power to the amplifier needs to remain on while you change the battery. Otherwise, if you turn off everything and remove the battery, you will lose the absolute position. So leave the control power on to the amplifier and you'll be fine. So with that, we will conclude the Sigma-5 hardware overview e-learning module. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. You can call our 800 number, you can go to our website, or you can even email us at training@yaskawa.com. Thank you very much and have a nice day.